Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Sean Talks Cybersecurity. I'm your host, Sean Wolfslegel. It is a lovely Thursday afternoon, and just really happy to be back here again, guys. Yeah, thank you so much for joining the Sean Talks Cybersecurity live stream. And we are back up and running after a series of technical issues over the last few days. I am finally back up and running just fine, the way that I expect to be, and I'm happy that I'm back. So no more issues, hopefully, knock on wood, and we are all good. So okay, let's jump over to the main screen here. All right, you might notice some changes. I made some changes around, just trying to get it looking the way that I want it to. So a little behind the scenes stuff going on. We're not going to jump into this article first. We're going to actually start with dark reading today. A little cybersecurity news for y'all. So dark reading, Alexander Kolafi over at Dark Reading reports that OpenAI operator agent used in proof of concept phishing attack. So researchers from Symantec showed how OpenAI's operator agent currently in research preview can be used to construct a basic phishing attack from start to finish. Let's read on. Security vendor Symantec used the OpenAI operator agent to show how an LLM-powered tool could perform a basic cyber attack with minimal prompt engineering, a showcase of what the future might hold. Symantec published its proof of concept as a research blog post on March 12th. As the Broadcom-owned vendor notes, most of the attacker use cases for large language models are passive up to this point. LLMs can generate content, such as convincing phishing emails, assist with basic coding tasks, and, as Google said in January, conduct some research tasks. However, this onset of generative AI-powered agents, which can perform additional tasks such as interacting with web pages, this increased capability for customers can also result in increased capability for attackers. So, all around, I think it's probably only a matter of time until this sort of thing happens, which we all kind of knew whenever the AI threat kind of came out. Now, AI is a very powerful tool, and it's very good for a lot of things, but the problem is it can absolutely be used for malicious purposes in the wrong hands, just like any other tool. So we will probably see some form of an AI-powered attack at some point in the future. So I would say to all the security teams out there, just make sure your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted to the best of your abilities. I know sometimes budgets play a part in that. Sometimes C-level approval plays a part in that. But my advice would just be to go ahead and do whatever you can within your power to go ahead and clean up that environment, so that way whenever the day comes, whenever that AI attack hits, you're ready. Yeah, come out and read this out here on Dark Reading. Pretty good read. Highly recommend checking that out. Let's move on here to some bleeping computer. These are the top stories that they got today, but we're going to dive into this one right here, which is the March 2025 patch Tuesday for, I guess it would have been this past Tuesday. We have fixed 70 days and 57 flaws. Yeesh. So we got 57 flaws, 23 elevation of privilege vulns, 3 security feature bypass vulns, 23 remote code executions, 4 information disclosures, 1 denial of service, and 3 spoofings. So obviously, there's going to be more, and Microsoft has been every single patch Tuesday. It seems like they've got a lot going on, which is good. It means their security teams are working, which is fantastic. And I like to see that on Microsoft's end. But just know, this is going to be a thing. So there's only going to be even more where these came from. So let's dive into here. So Win32 kernel system subsystem elevation of privilege vulnerability is our first one here. This is 2025-24938. Microsoft says that this vulnerability will allow local attackers to gain system privileges on the device after winning a race condition. Microsoft has not shared how the flaw was exploited in the attacks. However, as it was discovered by Philippe Jurcako with ESET, we will likely learn more in a future report. Pardon me. Okay, the next thing is Windows NTFS information disclosure vulnerability. Microsoft says that this flaw can be exploited by attackers who have physical access to the device and insert a malicious USB drive. So easy one to fix. I mean, come on, just don't take and insert any old malicious or any any old USB into your machines and you're fine. And you should have policies in place anyway for that sort of thing. People, if you're not doing that, you really should be. I mean, 2025, no USBs should just be randomly putting into PCs. There's other ways to share data, and USBs are a terrible method to do that. Yes, it's convenient. Yes, it's easy, but it is not a very secure method. So, moving on, we have this Windows Fast FAT file system driver remote code execution vulnerability. FAT as in like FAT32, like when you actually make a USB, right? Like you have FAT32. So Microsoft says that this remote code execution vulnerability is caused by an integer overflow or wraparound in Windows Fast FAT driver that, when exploited, allows an attacker to execute code. Okay, if you guys want to read more on this, definitely come out here to Bleeping Computer. There's a lot of good stuff out here, especially for you Windows admins out there. Anybody who's in a Windows Microsoft shop could find this stuff useful. But enough about the Microsoft then. Let's talk about this one. As you guys probably heard a few months ago, there was this big old hack on PowerSchool, which is a huge... basically all these different schools around the country, they use PowerSchool to for their different tech systems. And so this is really bad for a lot of education in the country right now, having this PowerSchool hack in August, months before the data breach. I mean, yeah, PowerSchool, I've heard some things about their organization, and I hear that they don't really take their security as seriously as they should. This is from somebody who used to work for them, and I'm not going to disclose who that person is that told me that information, but I will just say that just based on my own personal knowledge of people who work in this industry saying, you know, PowerSchool could have done things a lot better. I mean, that's just, there you go. I mean, there's probably things that could have certainly been done better here. And PowerSchool shared that a CrowdStrike incident report that was compiled on February 28, 2025. In that report, CrowdStrike confirms that the threat actors breached PowerSchool through PowerSource, using compromised credentials and maintained their access between December 19, 2024 and December 28th of 2024. And so beginning on August 16th, UTC PowerSource logs showed that an unknown actor successfully accessed the PowerSchool PowerSource portal using the compromised support credentials. And this, folks, is why you do zero trust, because if you don't do zero trust and you don't do least privilege, then you're not following good principles. It's really important that you have these things in place, because if you have this and they can get keys to your kingdom, like, you know, you're dead in the water. And also multi-factor authentication and checking for signs of lateral movement in your environment, like just basic things. Like, I mean, if PowerSchool was using basic cyber hygiene, they should have noticed this. I mean, granted, some attackers are really good at what they do. Some of the people who are legitimately like malicious, ethical, they're not ethical hackers, but malicious, like with malicious intent attackers getting into a system, you know, they're going to just work their way through and you might never notice them. And that's just the name of the game. But for the most part, if you have the controls in place, you should notice this sort of thing. So just my 2 cents. Okay. All right. So let's dive into the big one today, which is, let's dive in. Got to get back on the path here. I apologize. All right. Linux fundamentals. We were on part 3. We got to wrap that one up today. Okay. So part 3, if you remember yesterday, we finished up processes. So now we're going to get into automation in our system. So this stuff here is really important to know, because you certainly want to be able to create things what are called cron jobs, and cron as in chronic, like time. Chrono Trigger, for all of you gamers out there, all you RPG fans, Chrono Trigger is a great game, but that's how I remember it, cron for like chrono, right? So users may want to schedule a certain action or task to take place after the system is booted. Take, for example, running commands, backing up files, or launching your favorite programs, such as Spotify or Google Chrome, right? It could be anything. We're going to be talking about the cron process, but more specifically how we can interact with it via the use of cron tabs. Cron tab is one of the processes that is started during boot which is responsible for facilitating and managing cron jobs. And anybody who manages Windows, I know that I'm talking about Linux right now, but you can do the same thing in Windows using like a .bat file, right? Batch file. So we actually just did that for a client recently to do a program that he wanted to have open. So I say we because I'm talking about somebody who I work with on, occasions. And so basically, and he might actually come on at some point on this channel, and we can do some discussions. And I'm pretty excited for that one. So we'll see. We've talked about it a little bit, but I'm working with him on trying to figure out a time, and I think it'd be fun to have him actually come on, and we can talk about how our different paths diverge and such. So anyway, enough about that. Cron tab is simply a special file with formatting that is recognized by the cron process to execute each line step by step. Cron tabs require 6 specific values. So you need the minute for min for minute, hour, obviously hour, DOM, which is the day of the month, your mon, which is the month of the year, DAO, which is your day of the week to execute, and CMD, which is the actual command that will be executed, right? Okay, so you can see kind of here like how that works. You see here, minute, hour, DOM, and then mon, DAO, and then your actual command. So it even says it for you right there. Okay, so let's use the example of backing up files. You may wish to back up semantics, CMNATIC, semantics documents every 12 hours. How would you use the following formatting? So you would do 0 and then 12 star this asterisk right here, 12, right? So that's a wildcard. And then you have these other asterisks, but let's break it down here. So an interesting feature of cron tabs is that there's also a support the wildcard asterisk. So if we do not wish to provide a value for that specific field, i.e. we don't care what month, day, or year it is executed, only that it is executed every 12 hours, we simply just place an asterisk, right? So this can be confusing to begin with, which is why there are some great resources online, such as the cron tab generator, that allows you to use a friendly application to generate your formatting. So let's do that. Let's see what happens if we go out here. So you see, things like this are everywhere. And, if you go to get into like trying to figure out like a hex and you're trying to break that apart, there's websites out there that are like this, any kind of like hashes, anything like that, right? So really highly recommend, making come up here and bookmark it or whatever you use. I don't know if you use Google Chrome, but whatever you use as your web browser, bookmark it and save it for later. It could be useful for you. So depending on what you're doing, if you're doing Linux, you could see how that would be helpful. This can be confusing to begin with. Yeah, as I said, all right. So cron tabs can be editing by using cron tab -E, where you can select an editor, such as Nano, to edit your cron tab. So cron job generated, you may copy and paste it into your cron tab, right? And then you see right here, this is the cron tab. Okay, so now copied and pasted following the same formatting as what it was recommended. And so now it's actually good. So when will the cron tab on the deployed instance machine IP run? Okay, so we got to redeploy our machine from yesterday. Let's do that. Should have started that with that, but I forgot all about it. So apologies, but that's where we're at with it. So we got to open up our attack box again, and we'll get cooking here. So we'll come back to that here in a second. Let's just dive a little bit further until we wait for these to load up. So let's talk about not packet management, but package management. So package and software repos. When developers wish to submit software to the community, they will submit it to an APT repository. What's an APT? Let's click the link and find out here. That doesn't work. Okay. So an APT repository. If approved, their programs and tools will be released into the wild. 2 of the most redeeming features of Linux shine to light here: user accessibility, and the merit of open source tools. When using the ls command on an Ubuntu 20.04 Linux machine, these files serve as the gateway registry. Okay, cool. And then whilst operating system vendors will maintain their own repositories, you can also add community repositories to your list. This allows you to extend the capabilities of your OS. Additional repositories can be added by using the add apt repository, right? So like apt, I think is what we're talking about here, which kind of got me a little bit mixed up here. But if we're talking about that, like sudo apt update or sudo apt upgrade, like those are like, that's your, I guess your package repository, right? So let's just do a quick Google search or DuckDuckGo search, so that way we make sure here. What is apt in Linux? That way we can talk about it for a second here. So Linux Eyes talks about this. Apt is a command line utility for installing, updating, and removing and otherwise managing deb packages in Ubuntu, Debian, and related Linux distributions. It combines the most frequently used commands from the apt-get and apt-cache tools with different default values of some options. Apt is designed for interactive use. Prefer using apt-get and apt-cache in your shell scripts, as they are backward compatible between the different versions and have more options and features, right? So like the Fedora equivalent is Yum. And so like you have Yum, at least it used to be. I don't know if they changed it, so don't shoot the messenger on that one if they did change it. Sometimes these different things change it, and I don't know anymore. So, but apt is basically just that tool that you're going to use, like here on Kali. Like you could do that too if you want to update or whatever you want to put on here. Okay, let's remote into our machine, because we need to do that before we get any further ahead here, because we got to go back and finish this automation task that we talked about earlier. Let's go ahead and say SSH try hack me at 10.10.120.228, and then it'll prompt me for the password if I'm right. And so that is going to be try hack me again, and we should be remoted in, and we're going to clear that, and we're in. Okay, so if you remember, usually what we do is we do ls-la to see what we got to work with here in the root directory. Or I guess it was actually, this is just the home directory. And so we have, when will the cron tab on the deployed instance 10.10.120.228 run? So first we have to go to where our cron tab is at, which is, yeah, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. Haven't touched any kind of cron jobs in a long time, but let's just go cron tab -e. Is that all we have to do? Yeah, there we go. Cron tabs can be edited using cron tab -e. That's where I picked that up. Reboot. Is that all we had? When will the cron tab on the deployed instance run? Var opt process.sh. Is that seriously it? I don't think that there's any anything out here except for just this. I guess on reboot, that would be all that we'd have. At reboot. Yeah, that was our answer. Okay, well, normally you'd see like, I guess that's a nice, easy way to put it, because instead of having to type out all these different minutes, hours, and all that, you just put at reboot, right? So, sweet. Let's move on ahead here. Back to what we were talking about before about software repos. Sorry for the little weave there. Just got to make sure that we stay on topic, and I don't want to bore you guys. But basically, right here, let's talk about the apt. So it's an etc. etc. I say etc. Typically, that's what you hear, and then apt. And this is the directory. So let's do that on our own machine here. cd etc. and then apt. And then let's see what we got here. We got this apt.conf.d, auth, preferences, sources.list, and trusted.gpg, right? And so you can see right here, it looks pretty similar to what we had here. apt.conf.d, auth, preferences, right? Okay, so that's essentially saying that whatever you're going to be on, it's going to be pretty similar, right? It might change depending on if you're on Ubuntu or Fedora or whatever, but essentially these are going to be similar. Okay, so this is sources.list. Uncomment the following two lines to add software from Canonical's partner repository. So right here, these are just your different repos that you can actually pull things from. So like, for example, like if you're gonna put like Open Office on a machine, that's kind of where you would go to do that. So that way you get all of your different items that you need to have, right? And you can add in different PPAs and things, but basically that's just a publicly available repository. So like if you get Git on your machine, if you try to put Git, you for source control, like if you don't know what source control is, basically that's just a way to keep track of your code and making sure that all your code lives in a central repository out on like GitHub or something. But anyway, if you have everything in in those paths, then that's all that really matters. You just want to be able to add those different repositories and add on from there, if that makes sense. And we're going to get into that here. So normally we use the apt command to install software onto our Ubuntu system, but the apt command is part of the package management software, also named apt. Apt contains a whole suite of tools that allows us to manage the packages, keyword here, manage the packages and sources of our software, right? Highlighting that because if we're going to highlight everything, like this is the main point here. Apt is your package manager, right? It's going to actually put things on your computer. It's the same way as whenever you download like an exe on Windows. One method of adding repositories is the use of add apt repository command we illustrated above, but we're going to walk through adding and removing a repository manually. Whilst you can install software through the use of package installers, such as dpackage, the benefit of apt means that whenever we update our system, the repository that contains the piece of software that we add also gets checked for updates. So in this example, we're going to add Sublime Text Editor. So, which, by the way, a little bit biased here, but I like Sublime. Sublime's pretty sweet, and the band is good too. But as far as text editors go, I'm a little bit biased to Visual Studio Code, but I do think Sublime is an amazing text editor as well. So just personal preference. Okay, so we got GPG. If you see here, GPG. These are GNU or GNU privacy guard keys. Okay. These keys are essentially a safety check from the developers saying, here's our software. If the keys do not match up to what your system trusts and what the developers use, then the software will not be downloaded. So just to kind of like a check, a balance, right? So to start, we need to add the GPG key for the developers of Sublime Text 3. Try-Hack-Me instances do not have internet access, and so we're not expecting you to add this to the machine that you deploy, as it would fail. So let's download the GPG key and use apt key to trust it. So this is how we would do it. We'd say wget-qo and then https download Sublime Text and then our GPG right there at the end. That's our pub GPG. You typically see this no matter what you're going to get, right? And then we would do our pipe. This is a pipe command. This is basically saying, okay, next we say sudo apt key add, right? And so now that we have added this key to our trusted list, we can now add Sublime Text 3's repository to our apt sources list. A good practice is to have a separate file for every different community third-party repository that we add. So let's create a file named Sublime Text.list in etc apt sources list.d and enter the repository information like so. So we do touch Sublime Text.list, list that out, ls, right? And then you see it there. And now basically you can do the nano, you can use the nano or text editor, whatever you have, Vim, doesn't matter. And then basically add and save the Sublime Text 3 repository into this newly created file. And after this, we've added the entry and we need to update apt to recognize this new entry. This is done using the apt update command. Once successfully updated, we can now proceed to install the software so that we have trusted and added to apt to use apt install Sublime Text, right? And then this is our PPA. This is the last thing I was mentioning. Removing packages is as easy as reversing the process is done by using the add apt repository, right? Remove PPA, PPA name, and then whatever the PPA is, right? Let's do a little sidetrack here. Let's do what is a PPA in Linux. That way, you guys can understand what that is because it's important. So, if you've been using Ubuntu or some other Linux distro on Ubuntu, such as Linux Mint or whatever you have, right? Then you notice that there's these PPAs, right? So, what is a PPA? Why is it used? Is it safe? How to properly use a PPA? Let me just answer some of those, some things I already know off the bat. Don't just go out on the internet and get any PPA because there are malicious ones out there. Don't just trust every PPA that you see. Make sure you're getting a reputable one, something that is verifiable, and you can actually go out and spend time researching, making sure that you're not just getting some fly-by-night PPA. You don't want to put that on your Linux machine because you probably will get into some bad stuff. It won't be good for you. Basically, PPA stands for a personal package archive. That is PPA, personal package archive. The PPA allows application developers and Linux users to create their own repositories to distribute software. With PPA, you can easily get newer software versions or software that are not available via the official Ubuntu repositories. So basically, this is where people just put their stuff if they don't want it to be in the official Ubuntu places. You'll see a lot of devs do that. It's just a matter of preference and a matter if the dev wants to actually put it on the Ubuntu. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I don't know why. But that's just to keep this kind of like flowing. And Mitch, I really just kind of feel like you guys need to know this information. It's really important to understand. So, yeah, that's it for the PPAs. And so we can go ahead and finish that out. But essentially, the one thing I would recommend here, just to kind of tie a bow on this section here up, I just want to make sure that you guys know what I would recommend to do is to go ahead and go and build out an Ubuntu box on a VM. Like you could just go out to VirtualBox and download that, and then build out your Ubuntu VM. Start to play around in it. Like start to do these commands and get used to it. Or just come out here on TryHackMe and do this. But like you're not going to be able to install these PPAs, so you need to know this step. So I would highly recommend you still make that virtual machine of Ubuntu, or you could do like sometimes things are like heavy, so you probably want to actually do something like Xubuntu, Xubuntu. This is actually a really highly recommended version of Ubuntu. Of course, service unavailable. Well, anyway, you can just go out here and you can click on download, right? And then you can start to see what it looks like. But see, this is it's not the most beautiful looking thing. It actually looks like something out of like the early 2000s. But it will be lightweight and it's not going to take up any system resources. You could run this on a computer from like, 2010 or 2008 probably. It's really lightweight, and so it'll run in pretty much any computer, whatever you have. So go out, download Xubuntu, and there's also another one too, and that is Lubuntu. So let me just show you that one so you have some options. But basically, you want to download these, and one or the other. Lubuntu looks a lot prettier. So there you go. You can download Lubuntu, and then they're both super lightweight versions of Ubuntu. Just follow along. Go out to ChatGPT if you have get stuck, because ChatGPT can kind of walk you through it. This is where I think AI comes in and actually really helps people, is where you can just say hey, how do I actually get this? And then it'll walk you through the steps. But as you're doing it, this is super important, and this goes for everything else in life too. Make sure that you're not just you're not just following the instructions and just reading. You're actually understanding, well, why am I doing it this way? Why am I doing this step and then this step and then this step? You shouldn't just be passively I'm just going to follow these instructions and then just kind of go with the motions, so to speak. That's not what you want. You want to actually understand what it is you're trying to do. And that's why I say AI is such a bad thing, because a lot of people just let it do all the work for you, and you shouldn't. But you should you can use it to understand basically how to go through this step and actually install a package. You could just be like, hey, ChatGPT, what package should I install? And it'll give you a random one to just install, and you could do that. Git would be my recommendation, because Git is going to show you how to do the PPAs. So there you go. That's what I would go with. Okay, so maintaining your system, so you got logs. Logs are essential to what we do in cybersecurity, and they are going to be super important for you to do. There's log aggregators. Let's go to Splunk and talk about Splunk for a second, because this is everybody's baby when it comes to cybersecurity. So you will find that if you're trying to get a job in cybersecurity and you plan on being blue team, you had better know Splunk. Splunk is essential. Basically, what it is it's called a SIEM, right? And a SIM or SIEM, right? Basically, it's a place where you take all of your logs and you put it, and then you're able to build these dashboards out, and then you can actually try to like pull apart like all the information. Like you can see in real time, like if you're being attacked, just based off of the logs that it's pulling in from all these different systems. Something like this is extremely important for like larger businesses, especially because you might have like thousands of endpoints, and you might have like a couple hundred servers or more, and like you can't just like check each server individually. So you need some place to go to like pull all these things in, right? So that's where like a log aggregator comes in, a SIM tool, and then it actually allows you to like pull all that information and start to understand like how the logs are helpful, right? You can do it like one at a time, but that's like trying to find a needle in a needle stack. It's going to be impossible. The other thing I'll say is this: they have these things called SOARs, and so there's no sense in getting a SOAR if you don't have a SIM set up. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but this is the new big thing on the block, and it has been for a few years now. So if you're trying to really get good at this and you really want to understand these things, I highly encourage you to come out here on Splunk.com and check out their like what a SOAR is. Basically, it takes all the stuff that you have in a SIM, and it takes it and says, I'm going to actually automate that. I'm going to take and say, okay, if I'm getting 10,000 requests over to this top level domain and they're happening within a matter of minutes, well, that's probably the sign of a DDoS attack, right? I need to go ahead and block that IP from being able to connect up and whatever it's trying to do, or at least flag an administrator, send them an email, send them a text message, and say, hey, like just to let you know, like you're probably under attack right now. So those kinds of things are why I really stress this. SIM and SOAR are super important. I say SIM because it's how I've always heard it. You might hear it say SIEM, SIEM. And so let's just talk about that for a second. But this is what you are. This is what I'm talking about. There's tons of them out there. Splunk is the big guy on the block. But it is a security, information, and event management solution. It's a log aggregator is what it is. And so you're able to take all these different logs, all this network traffic and everything, and then point it into a way that's useful. Actually read that. So if you're going to be an analyst, this is what you will spend some time doing. Okay, anyway, back to the subject at hand. We have Task 8, which is maintaining your system logs. We briefly touched upon log files and where they can be found in part 1 of Linux fundamentals, and then let's recap. So we have this var log directory, and these files and folders can contain logging information for applications and services running on your system. The OS has become pretty good at automatically managing these logs in a process that is known as rotating. So here, the person who wrote this up said they highlighted some logs from 3 services running on an Ubuntu machine. So they have Apache 2. They have logs for the fail to ban service, which is used to monitor brute force attacks, for example, right? Fail to ban right here. And then the UFW service, which is used as a firewall, okay? So these services and logs are a great way in monitoring the health of your system and protecting it. And you can see why a tool like Splunk would be super useful for pulling all this information in and then being able to break it down. Not only that, but the logs for services such as a web server contains information about every single request, allowing developers or administrators to diagnose performance issues and investigate an intruder's activity. So you have access logs and error logs. And so typically in my past, basically this is the things that we would be concerned with, although these types of things are very important as well. Your access logs are extremely important from an IAM perspective. If you don't remember what IAM is, that's identity and access management. You want to basically make sure whoever's on that machine should be on that machine and nobody else. And so, and also too, super useful as well from a blue team perspective is this is actually how you can catch somebody in the act if they do something malicious on your machines through your access logs, because you can prove essentially, as long as it's not a shared machine with shared users, that uh, basically so and so Sally went from accounting, went on this computer at this time, and she accessed confidential financial files, and then she shared that out with somebody in the New York Times. That's sort of the thing that you can imagine that you can do here. So okay. So look for Apache 2 logs on the deployable machine. I hit correct. I did that and I haven't done it yet. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and switch over to cd var log, and let's do an ls-la. And so we can see here that we have Apache 2 right here. So let's do cd Apache 2. And then let's do an ls-la again. And so we have an access log, access log.1, and then a couple error logs here. So let's see if we can do cat access log. Okay, let's do sudo cat access log. Okay, so we can't get that. All right. How can we do this? All right, let's see. What is the IP address of the user who visited the site? What file did they access? So maybe it's under access log 1. Let's try that. All right. Okay. Maybe that's actually just... Let's do cat access. All right, maybe that'll help us out. Okay, there we go. Get cats and dogs.jpg, and then we have a 200, and then it's Apple WebKit and Chrome 90. So I'm guessing this is our guy right here. So we have 10.9.232.111. And then what file did they access? They accessed cats and dogs.jpg. And so, yeah. Now, sometimes you're going to see, like, if you remember, so this is actually owned by the root. So you can see we shouldn't actually be able to access that. So, and then this is try hack me. So that would have been our giveaway on why that worked out that way. Okay. But in a nutshell, that is Linux. If you haven't watched the other videos at this point, if you haven't seen any of the other Linux tutorials and what I went over before in Try Hack Me here and going through this box, I would highly encourage you to go back and watch those, and I think that you'll get a lot out of them. So as you can see here, tomorrow starts Windows. I'm going to go ahead and start diving into some Windows, talk about some blue stuff, and I say blue stuff because of PowerShell, and Windows is typically the blue stuff. But basically, we're going to get into some of that tomorrow. I'm excited. Windows is kind of how I started, and Linux is how I plan on finishing out. And I like Windows. There are some issues with it, of course, just like anything else. But we'll dive into that tomorrow. I'm happy that I got all my setup back normal and everything. One last thing before I finish up, I just wanted to say there's basically just a changing stuff going on in the cybersecurity world right now. And I'm working on some stuff that I just want to talk about it a little bit, and some of my frustrations that are happening on the end of the cybersecurity industry. But yeah, I just I'll get there eventually, and we'll have that discussion. But stay tuned for that one. If you get a chance, please hit that like button, subscribe, share this with your friends, and really appreciate you hopping on today. And thank you so much. Hope you guys have a nice day, and I'll see you tomorrow.